After watching the new Ant-Man Quantumania, I realized one thing for certain. Marvel is indeed finished. Since Avengers Endgame, a mixture of miserable storytelling, a blatant misjudgment of what the actual core audience really wants, and the new megalomaniacal, self-righteous goal of wanting to primarily educate the masses rather than entertain is what has caused the Phase 4 films to continually get worse over the past year. Quantumania was supposed to be the most important movie after Endgame, according to Marvel boss Kevin Feige. That Ant-Man and even the Wasp naturally can't lift what Iron Man, Captain America, Thor, Black Widow, etc. all managed to do together was basically clear to everyone except Marvel apparently, because audiences were made to think that the studio still had the ultimate ace up its sleeve. Well, turns out Marvel was bluffing, knowingly or unknowingly. A completely laughable movie supposed to be sold to fans as a masterpiece in a desperate attempt to somehow lure people into theaters after all. Works pretty well so far. Warning, there will be mild spoilers for Ant-Man 3 in this video, should any of you actually be up to watching the movie. In any case, glad that you tuned in here. Remember a time when we were actually looking forward to the release of a new superhero movie? A time when you actually knew what you were getting, because Marvel gave the people what they wanted and just delivered? I remember when the humorification of Marvel movies was what bothered me the most. Meaning, in almost every scene it was about really deep, serious emotions, a joke would be packed in somewhere in order to provide some comic relief to not make the movie too serious.
Trust me and possibly kill me. Swear to me on your mother.
Okay. Dude, how long have you been standing there?
An hour.
But of course there were also many jokes that were actually funny and very entertaining, no question about it. And it was also easy to excuse the inappropriate ones, because the rest of the stories as a whole just simply worked. But it's always a question of the right balance. The Ant-Man movies in particular stood out for their goofy humor. Okay, wrong word. They were defined by it. Ant-Man was not a character that could compete with the other Avengers when it came to inner conflicts or his abilities. Basically, Ant-Man has no abilities, but depends on a suit he didn't even build himself, and that didn't even work properly in the last movie. But still, Scott, aka Ant-Man, is just a normal, upstanding guy who just slipped into the whole superhero thing and just always tries to make the best of it. An okay, likable supporting character who, even in his own story from the second film on, no longer played the main role and was rather a support for the actual heroines. But it kind of worked that way anyway. But then Marvel came up with the grand idea to remove all the popular, established superheroes, or castrate them, rob them of their masculinity, and all of a sudden, Ant-Man is supposed to take on one of the pole positions in the Avengers. Oh yeah, I can't wait to see Ant-Man, Captain Marvel, She-Hulk, and Shang-Chi in one movie. Dream team. Yeah, if Ant-Man had just stuck with the goofy humor and generally light-hearted tone, he wouldn't have been taken seriously as the new Alpha Avenger. But do you know how he could be taken even less seriously? After a movie like Quantumania. The light-hearted tone has suddenly disappeared or seems out of place, and we as viewers are now supposed to just accept that the future of not just one universe, but all universes rests on Ant-Man's shoulders. On the shoulders of the same man whose suit doesn't even work properly. The film also generally has nothing to do with the previous Ant-Man films, but is basically the continuation of Loki Season 1. Yes, this Loki.
Pathetic.
Also, it's a direct prequel to Loki Season 2, one of the few Disney Plus series whose release date for 2023 hasn't been pushed back yet. Consequently, the plot of Quantumania takes itself way too seriously and absolutely fails to strike the balance between jokes and seriousness that the Russo brother movies, or even the Guardians of the Galaxy, managed to strike. So we get this guy, for example, MODOK, who says of himself that he's a super dangerous villain and is also supposed to provide laughs on the side, but it's just a sad testament to both the CGI company that worked on the film, not to mention the screenwriters. I mean, are they serious? The story of the movie and the MCU in general is getting more and more confusing. There's the quantum realm, multiverses, multiple timelines. Everything has to get bigger and bigger and stretch across even more universes. And it's no longer just about the fate of our world, but the fate of eternity. And the actual villain, Kang, is even bigger and more powerful and more dangerous than Thanos was. And he doesn't exist only once, but infinitely many times. Not to mention that no one really can die anymore, because there's always the opportunity now to bring characters back from other timelines. Sometimes a wish for the simple origin stories to come back. Jonathan Majors as an actor is the only worthwhile thing to see in the movie. Kang is also not a clown, but a serious opponent. And after Namor, this is pretty refreshing. But the whole MCU has become so exaggerated and sprawling, and even in the superhero genre, there comes a point when it becomes so unbelievable that one loses interest. What doesn't really help either, by the way, are the studio's constant, tiring attempts at lecturing people. Remember Scott's daughter, Cassie, who was an incredibly cute kid in the first 2 Ant-Man movies? Well, that girl has now grown into a cocky, overbearing political activist who now accuses her father, who saved the damn world with the Avengers, of not doing enough for the world because he's not an activist or something. Aside from Cassie's saving the world by being an activist, she is, how could it be otherwise in the modern MCU, also hyper-intelligent, and after reading Hank Pym's diaries, just like that, she built a subatomic Hubble telescope in her basement, a device that can contact the quantum realm, something that Hank Pym, the inventor of the Ant-Man suit, has not been able to do in decades. Representation is all well and good, but who is the character of Cassie supposed to appeal to? The typical Marvel fans? Apparently not to young women who have to work hard for success in their lives, like, surprise surprise, the majority of people. And don't be fooled. Marvel or Disney don't do anything out of pure philanthropy, but simply because these people actually think that they can make more money by spreading their messages with the introduction of quotas, etc. And on the subject of philanthropy, we're talking about the same companies that simply hid Chadwick Boseman's face behind a mask on the Chinese poster for the first Black Panther in order to appeal to more people. In addition to all of that, in Ant-Man 3, Hank Pym directly praises the socialist way of life of ants. Clearly, such a sentence is only in the script to pander to a certain country in order to make sure that this movie and future Marvel movies can be released there. With all of that, the question comes to mind more than once. Are Marvel movies really still made for the general public who just wants to be entertained for 2 hours? In Ant-Man Quantumania, there are way too many unnecessary characters. Michael Douglas Hank Pym philosophizes about socialist ants and flies an airship. Bill Murray has a 2-minute pointless appearance that only exists to stall for time. And actually, the movie is called Ant-Man and the Wasp, but the Wasp says only around 3 sentences during the whole movie. Star of the show is Michelle Pfeiffer, who probably doesn't smile once during the whole movie, because otherwise you could have seen that even a pronounced facial expression wouldn't have brought out a single wrinkle on her 64-year-old face. But what the heck, if you're a boss like her, you don't have to smile or make any other efforts to come across as likable in front of the audience. To really sympathize with her, it's enough for us to know that she's confident and good at beating people up. By the way, when they were all still in the normal world, she never mentioned that in the quantum realm below, there's someone as highly dangerous as Kang, with whom she has lived for years, and who wants to rule the world, and she didn't say anything because she just wanted to forget what she's been through. There's nothing like selfless characters. The whole story of Ant-Man 3 is hair-raising. But rest assured, we will get into that in more detail in a separate video to also pay proper tribute to this masterpiece. If Kevin Feige really believed that Quantumania was supposed to usher in a new Endgame era, then this shows very clearly that Marvel simply has no idea what the audience really wants anymore. Quantumania gobbled up an enormous $200 million budget, and out came something like this. Now, what exactly is supposed to follow this year? The Guardians Volume 3 will be the last film in the series, as James Gunn has repeatedly confirmed. That leaves such top-class projects such as Echo and Ironheart and The Marvels, all of which have been already pushed back from their initial release dates, as Marvel may slowly be realizing after recent disappointments that quotas and modern messages alone are not enough to encourage audience viewership, and so they are trying to salvage the yet-to-be-released projects in post-production. Loki Season 2 seems to be one of the few pretty certain things, and the way Marvel's currently operating, we can undoubtedly be sure that Loki will be treated with respect. But maybe Blade will be good. Maybe we should not completely stop hoping yet. In 2022, Disney stock fell 45%, the worst it has ever been since 1974. The streaming service Disney Plus is no longer just making a fat $1 billion loss, but has recently also been losing subscribers for the first time. Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania can't keep up with Doctor Strange 2 or Thor: Love and Thunder in its first weekend at the box office, and it's all but certain that it will earn back its budget, assuming that would only be the case if it makes about $600 million or 2.5 to 3 times its budget at the box office. None of this is good news for Disney. The big question is, what conclusions will be drawn from this? Will the company start producing more of what people really want to see again? Or, and unfortunately, it looks like this is the most likely option, will we just be bombarded with even more? More multiverses, even bigger villains, even more massive CGI to cover up weak storytelling, even more empty, self-righteous political messages that no one who doesn't live in an elitist Hollywood bubble can or wants to really identify with. It happened with gangster or western movies, and with disaster movies, and with many other genres in many other eras. Movie eras that came to an end simply because not enough people were interested in those kind of films anymore. And sadly, it actually looks like superhero movies, especially from Marvel Studios, will meet a similar fate. As someone who grew up with superhero movies and who loved them, I sincerely hope I'm wrong. Let's see what the future holds. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe. Also, you could be interested in our other video about the current state of Marvel. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.